Hi everyone, this is Emily from Special Needs Resource Foundation and San Diego Family Magazine. Today we're going to be reading Weeds Find a Way by Cindy Jensen Elliott with illustrations by Carolyn Fisher. Cindy Jensen Elliott has written several different books, and she's a teacher primarily, so this is a great teaching book. In fact, in the back there's actually an illustration and a guide to all different types of weeds. Really recommend it. But this book is mostly about resiliency, and our kids with special needs tend to be very resilient. So I think it's very, very pertinent to what we go through, especially right now. So we also chose it because it has this really awesome chalk hopscotch, and we're going to be doing a chalk obstacle course later on with my friend Wesley. So without further ado, let's start Weed Find a Way. Weeds find a way to live where other plants can't grow. Each weed carries thousands of seeds, each waiting to make a new weed. Weeds send their seeds into the world in wondrous ways, fluffing up like feathers and floating away in the wind. It's great alliteration in this book. Swirled into prickly burrs that stick to socks and fur, poking into pants and paws in tiny needles. Or shot out of tight, dry pods like confetti from a popped balloon. Weed seeds find a way to wait, sitting still in icy earth all winter. Or baking in shimmering summer heat on a white-hot sidewalk without a whisper of wind. Till clouds billow and soft rain spills, carrying them floating downstream to sprout. In the smallest, strangest place they could possibly live. Weeds find a way to grow by the side of a windy road, in a crack in a cellar of a creaky old house. In a tangle of tree roots at the top of a spine of stone, or wedged in the worn sole of a tattered sneaker. Weeds find a way to stay, reaching deep with a grip so strong the stem always breaks first, leaving the living roots behind to sprout again, or pinching into pieces the minute you try to tug them out, spreading into a spray of plant parts that find new spots to take root. Weeds find a way to fight, hooking tender skin with horny thorns, stinging unsuspecting tongues and invisible prickles, and surprising hungry insects with sap so tart it could turn a tongue inside out. Weeds find a way to be loved, sending up flares of riotous red, flags of green, umbrellas of the finest white lace, making a place sing with bees and birds, exhaling breath as sweet as sleep. Weeds find a way to stay, unexpected guest who just happened to bring the whole family along. And that's the end. All of our books that we've chosen, we got permission from the authors. And I'd like to thank Cindy Jensen Elliott and also her publisher Simon & Schuster, for letting us read this book. I want you to take a look at this illustration. You see how it's black with colors on top of it? So the background, instead of, typically we have like white background and we're drawing things on top. This is a wonderful black background, and our craft is kind of like that today too. So today we're going to be working on dandelion prints, because you can find dandelions even if you live in the city. They'll grow out of cracks in the sidewalk. So when my first one I did using white with just a little bit of yellow. And I really like the way this turned out, because one of Cindy's other books is called Antsy Ansel. It's about Ansel Adams, who's a famous photographer who took wonderful black and white photographs of Yosemite and other places in Northern California. And I love this because it looks almost like a negative of what the photo would be. So the first one was like this, but if you prefer a little more colorful version, we have this one too. So this looks more like Ms. Fisher's illustrations, where we did the black background, and these are actual pieces of dandelion that I used as the leaves. Now I'm going to tell you, this is not a simple leaf to use, so I'm going to show you some ways to adapt different things, to adapt the printing part of the process for us. So what are we going to need? Well, if we're doing this one, you're going to need green paint, yellow paint, and white paint. We are going to be using our fingers. We're going to be using 2 different sizes of paintbrush, this bigger size and this smaller size. If you don't have a bigger size, that's okay. You can use a smaller size. It just takes a little bit longer. And we're going to be using a fork. This is just a simple plastic fork. And since I did 2 different types of dandelions, the dandelion that's bloomed and the dandelion that's about to bloom, I actually broke off one tine so that I could make a smaller array of different petals on the dandelion. So one smaller one, or you can do this first and then break up a tine afterward. So if you want to see, this is a regular dandelion flower. And this is actually one that's dyed, but it actually, as they open up, look very similar. You see that it's got this wonderful green part here with the little tendrils hanging down, and this is where the all of our petals come out of, all the yellow part. And of course, there's the seeds, but they're hard to bring inside because then they go everywhere. So we're going to start by first making our flowers, then we're going to make our leaves, and finally we're going to sign it. The reason I start with the flowers is for placement. It's a lot easier to manipulate where the leaves are going after you do your flowers. So I am going to start with my white paint. And usually I'm a big fan of acrylic paints. I'm going to tell you, I really like tempera paint for this project because tempera paints tend to be a little more chalky and they stand up really well on top of a darker surface. And I'm using you can use colored construction paper, which kind of has the same density, but I'm using colored printer paper. And the reason I like this is because if I have a child that's not adept at manipulating surfaces, if they tend to rub more, this doesn't break as easily. It doesn't get too wet if there's too much paint on it. It'll stand up a lot better. Again, resiliency. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to take a pencil, and I can either draw around a cap, or this, if I'm using my scissors, I can draw on the inside of my scissors, and I'm going to draw a couple circles for which are kind of like guides. Probably pretty hard to see. There you can see it. Which are the guides for where I'm going to put my fingerprints. And my fingerprints are going to be the actual sprayed part of the seed. You know, the part when you blow it and it goes away. Also, the other thing that I should be talking about too is that dandelions are a fantastic way, unless you don't want them in your yard, it's a fantastic way to work on speech pathology and to get that sound. Because when you blow like if you're blowing a bubble, if you blow a seed pod, it helps the muscles around the mouth. So great thing to, if you're working on all this together, it's another great tip. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my white paint and tap a little bit off, and I'm just going to start going around that circle so that and the reason I'm initially doing the round is that it keeps things in a circular motion, or in a circle. So if I can see if I can do this backwards, maybe I'll look down. I'm just going to go around like this. And it's okay if you see a little bit through and they're not perfectly circled, because let's face it, dandelions aren't perfect either. And then I can take a few and do them in the center as well, because it's a globe. It's not just a perfect round like this, it's also dimensional. So it's round like this and like this. So I'll do a couple more. So there are my seed pods. And again, here's my versus my finished one. Okay. So now get a little piece of tissue paper and wipe off my finger. So now I'm going to work on my flower. And very similarly, I'm going to draw a basic circle in the center here, kind of like that. And then I'm going to open my yellow paint, and I'm going to tamp out a little bit of yellow. And you want to make sure that you can see the tines in between. If you get a big glob of it and it starts to stick in between the tines, you won't get that perfect little spray of the petals. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down all the way around and make my petals. And you can overlap. You don't have to. It's okay if you overlap a little bit, or if they're a little bit different, because no petals grow exactly the same way. So it's going to kind of look like that. Okay. And then for my little one that's starting to emerge, I don't need a circle for that. I'm just going to put down my first three, just like that, and then just do another one just slightly off center from that. Just kind of like that. Okay. So now, because the center of the flower kind of gets, is more full and it's hard to see all those little things, we can do a couple of things. If you have orange paint at home, you can take your finger and dab a little orange in there, and it will mix with the yellow, and then you get the varied colors. You can also do it with a white if you want it to, if you want to show. And I'll use a little white here. It starts to mix a little bit, and it shows up as if it's more to the fore, because it's a tint, because it mixes with the yellow. So just like that with my tamping. Okay. I'm going to wipe my finger off. So now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my print for my leaves. Now dandelions, okay, so here's two different types of dandelions. This kind of has a more rounded edge. It's not quite as interesting, but they're a little bit easier to use. But dandelions are very soft, so they're not easy to manipulate. And the longer that you bring them inside, that you keep them inside, the harder they are to manipulate, because they start to get softer. And you'll see that I pulled up the root here. And the reason I pulled it all the way, I grabbed all the way around the base and pulled it all the way up, is if I leave a little piece of it, the next time the dandelion grows, it'll have more shoots and it'll be even more resilient. So it'll be harder to pull out. So even though I love dandelions, they're beautiful, I don't want them with the rest of my flowers. So I pulled them out from the root. And look how long that root is. Look how long this is. This is exactly what Cindy's talking about in her book. Lots of resiliency there. It's spread out like, oh no, you're not taking me, baby. The other cool thing about dandelions is that they are 100% edible. And if you're wondering what they taste like, they kind of taste like spinach. Maybe a little bit more pungent. If you use a little vinegar when you fry them up, or wilt them kind of like you wilt spinach. And you need to be careful when you eat something. You need to make sure that if you are using Miracle-Gro or fertilizer on your grass, you don't want to eat the dandelions from your grass, because they'll have all that fertilizer. Even if you wash it off, it's better to use organic ones. I know these are next to my flowers, so I know they're organic because I'm not using Miracle-Gro in those flowers. So we've taken off our leaf just like this, And then I'm going to press that leaf into the paint and put that on my paper. Now, let's say that I am a student that can't hold like this. Okay, this doesn't work for me because I can't physically pick this up and put it down on the paper. Or I'm a student who could do that, but maybe I'm a little bit younger and a little bit messier, might be a little bit harder. Well, then what I can do is I can trace my dandelion leaf on a piece of paper. Just trace around the outside. And then for little hands, you might want to have an older sibling or mom or dad help. And then you get this wonderful leaf print. And this is much more sturdy than a dandelion. If you look at this, it's much more rigid. So, you know, it's like this is, if I bend one and bend the other, the dandelion's going to go bloop, 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 bloop. But this guy's pretty steady. The other thing is I get the wonderful negative effect here, which we can use as a stencil. So if you have a child who can do this, you can wad up a piece of tissue paper or an old sock and dip it into the paint. Press this down on the piece of paper. And use it as a stencil. And the negative effect will be the shape of our leaf. Now, again, for my abilities and for my child's abilities, the easiest thing is to work with the shape of the actual dandelion itself. However, if you have a child whose needs are a little bit different, you can do it this way. Same kind of cool effect, still an actual dandelion leaf, but again, we're adapting to make it work for each person. So I'm going to take my paint and I'm going to try to keep the dandelion. I'm going to use this end to hold on to. I'm going to try to keep the paint on one side. I'm just going to press it into the paint. It works best if you use thicker paint. I like Behr paint because I think it's the thickest paint. I'm not saying it's the best paint. It's just the thickest paint that I've ever used as a professional painter. And but again, tempera paint is actually kind of the best paint. And then you have to very carefully lay this on your paper. If you move it around too much, you lose the shape of the dandelion. And then you want to lightly tap it down to make sure you get it all there. Okay. And then sometimes if you're lucky, you can do a second one with the same amount. But if not, you can reapply more paint. And there we get our dandelion leaves. Again, this other way works just fine, and you'll see it might even be a tad neater. But this is actually using the leaf itself. Now the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my white paint, and I'm going to make the little stems of the dandelion. The little stems, kind of this, it's the base of the seed, not really a stem. The base of the seed, I'm gonna make little marks. Basically, I'll be doing little marks like this. So if here's my seed, this is the seed. It kind of goes down just like that, okay? Now, if I have a problem holding the paintbrush, this is my husband's exercise gloves or biking gloves. I've also showed you on other videos that you can just cut off a pair of old gloves that you might have outgrown because your fingers are too long, but the body of the thing still works. So if I have a student who cannot use a pencil or a paintbrush, I can just slip the paintbrush in the biking glove like this, okay? Help them dip into the paintbrush, and then we're going to draw the stems of our dandelion. And if the child can move their own, if not, you just have the child put it there and you move the paper up just like that. Okay? Again, we're going to do We're going to do it here. And I'm going to move the paper. I'm moving the paper. I'm not moving my other hand. So that way, everyone should be able to the best of their ability. And again, everyone's going to look different. It's okay. So that's kind of how that looks. Then I'm going to make the dandelion that's emerging, the plant that's just starting to open. And the way I'm going to do that is I am going to make a circle and fill in that circle. And then I'm going to do a couple little tendrils right before the yellow. So just like that. And that's, as you can see, this part right here. So it's a circle with those little tendrils coming out. So on my piece right here, I'm going to do a circle and then a few little green parts coming out like this. So there's my emerging dandelion piece. Then I can go back, and if there's maybe there's some spots that didn't get filled in, I can use my paintbrush and kind of fill in those spots so that it becomes really obvious that this is a dandelion leaf. Maybe make the edge, the top parts a little more pointy. So there you go. So there's our dandelion leaf print. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sign it, because we like to sign and date things at our house, because when we do, then I remember, oh, this is from 3rd grade, or this is from Miss Haugen's class. So we do our little signing there. So that's how our dandelion art print. Now, if you have any questions about, we have a video that has other tips about adapting things for kids that might have different abilities, different mobility issues, especially with the top part of their body when we're doing sensory crafts. The other thing you can do is you can do the whole thing with finger paint. You don't need to use all these different pieces. This was just teaching kids a way they could use. I've also seen people that take the dandelion just like this and dip it in paint and use that dandelion to create their flower like that. I like the tines. I think it looks a little bit more like petals, but there's all different ways you can use nature. If you can't find a dandelion petal, but you have other petals, that's okay too. You can get a different type of leaf and press that into it and make it look like, kind of add little pieces of it to make it look like a dandelion leaf. That's the beauty of doing it. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is our outside obstacle course, and I'm going to ask Wesley to give me a hand with that. See you soon. Okay, this is Wesley, our awesome volunteer for the Special Needs Resource Foundation of San Diego, and he has volunteered to go through our front of the yard obstacle course, which we've created while we're sheltering in place to keep kids active. Go, Wesley. Okay, first he's hopping on one foot. Now he's going to follow the balance board. Then he's jumping. Wow, you're jumping so fast I can't keep up with you. Now we're lunging. Big lunges. Big lunges. Now we're going to turn 3 times. And then we're going to do our steady ourselves, our hopscotch. And then we're going to walk like a bear. Here we go. Hand and feet together. Other foot. Your left foot, there we go. Now walk together like a bear. Okay, then we're gonna follow that balance line again. Then we're gonna do a big jump like a big frog. Boom. Now we're gonna start here. 1, 2, 3, fast as you can. Woo! Excellent, thank you, Wesley.